Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Southampton, part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Sackicko Finch. I'm joined today by my co-host, as always, Gregory Elliott. How you doing, mate? You good?
Yeah, I'm alright, mate. It's, I've almost perked up from the weekend. We're getting there.
Almost.
All part of the process, isn't it? So
it is, unfortunately, part of the process that we must deal with nowadays. It's just being a Saints fan, isn't it? You know, like you can't get around the fact that we will put in some horrific performances every single season and be really sad off the back of it. We'll usually have at least a couple of weeks where we get cross with the manager, maybe even more. It's just weird vibes all around, because it's like you're now seeing people come out and defend Russell Martin. You're now seeing people be even more mad than they were before. We've already got the Martin out banners on every social media going for Frostball. So it's like, oh, good, we got this again to deal with.
I saw the most amazing thing on, I can't even remember what social network it was on, if I'm honest, Zach, but it was on one of them. It was a whole thread of comments of Martin out, Martin out, Martin out, Martin out, and just one buried in there of "In Martin we trust," and that seems to be the minority opinion.
It's
Fair play.
It's a weird time, because it's, who would you replace him with? I don't even know how to answer that question realistically, because it's like anyone and everyone, but also I don't really want to go for the same managers that every other club ends up firing every after 2 or 3 years. It just seems pointless. Longevity in football doesn't seem to be a thing that exists anymore, so maybe it's refreshing we're trying it. Who knows? It's a weird time to be a Saints fan. I think they're opening up the Dell pub soon at St Mary's, though. That's exciting.
Yeah, I think that's in time for Sunday's game.
So that'll be good.
Can't wait to pay more for a pint than the already rather extortionate pint at St Mary's.
Yeah,
fine.
but it won't be outside, so that's what you're paying for. You're paying the extra couple of quid to be not in the rain like we were the other day. Yeah, so it's a bit of a weird one. So obviously Wednesday's our wildcard. We have a lot of things in the background that we plan and stuff, but we're both busy people, and so we've decided to just do like a sort of general chit chat today of stuff that's going on around the league, stuff that's going along.
It's a busy time of year for football, isn't it?
There is a lot kind of mad. There is so much going on, and obviously the story that I wanted to start with today, Greg, which is coming as absolutely no surprise to anybody, is that Coote was sacked after his investigation.
Yeah.
So was suspended after a thorough investigation into his conduct. So what's your opinion of that, Greg?
Look, they've got to do the investigation properly and cross the T's and dot the I's and make sure it's done properly, but it would have been more a surprise if they came out after that investigation and didn't sack him, frankly. Especially with, presumably this is off the back of the investigation of the sort of initial stuff that came out, and based on the fact of all of the stuff that came out after that as well. Yeah, it's nobody can be surprised by it, least of all, I suspect, David Coote.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things that are the problem with this. Is it's massively harmful for PGMOL, for referees in general, and it kind of feeds into that whole toxic, like they plan to give the Big Six wins and stuff like that, because it's like, clearly this is just a guy who...
You should never assign to malice that which could be explained by incompetence.
There we go. That sums up the whole thing, right? Like that's the fact that everyone seems to think that there's some conspiracy behind it. I'm like, mate, this guy just did a load of substances and ended up getting in trouble. And he has a lot of money, and when people who have a lot of money do have a lot of money, they often get into illicit substances for the simple fact of they get bored of the normal things that people do. You know, clearly he was in some sort of crisis, probably in even bigger crisis now.
Tradition now states he's been sacked from PGMOL, and so I look forward to the 2025 tour around all of the clubs of David Coote reveals the truth of PGMOL.
Yeah, well, not even that.
It's inevitable, right?
You get a PR deal, you write a book, you say you're stupid and you're sorry. It will probably be devastating, because again, it's a couple of mistakes that have been, clearly there's someone, he upset the wrong people for the amount of stuff to come out like it did, and that's that. Like it's not ideal. It's not ideal for refereeing. It's a tough time to get into refereeing. I know that we've been quite critical, but never of the people, more of the system itself and the decision making up the top. I think it's a horrible job to have to do, and
Yeah. I
shout
don't
out
think
to all the
that's
ones that do
strictly
it.
true. I think that one time we were very critical of specifically Anthony Taylor, but
This
other
is
than
true,
that,
but I feel like he can take it, and none of it's personal abuse, mate. It's just the fact
no.
that we don't think that he can make decisions correctly. It's hard to stay on a high horse at that point, isn't it? It is what it is, but like it's damaging. I think for it's damaging for sort of Premier League football, and they'll have to really have a think about how they're going to go forward. And all it's going to take is if anything else comes out about any of the rest of them, that will be really problematic. Hopefully that isn't the case. Hopefully it just turns out he was like a bad apple amongst a sea of really really refreshing nice apples.
That
Oh,
is
it's
what it is,
difficult,
mate.
isn't it? When
What he did was
money gets involved.
stupid. He'll be the first to tell you that, I'm sure.
Mm.
And yeah, it is what it is. But it's you're right. It's an impossible job, and we've talked about it before on the podcast about what the solution might be, and even with it sort of invisible and subconscious bias and how it definitely exists. And that's it's undisputably true because I will admit freely that I have been shopping at Gunwharf Quays and I enjoyed it, and I take my kids to Southsea, but I still, like in my soul, somehow hate Pompey. That's just the way it's taught. I don't, and but in the same, like I follow Eagles in American football, and I have no real life alignment to Philadelphia whatsoever. It just so happened that Eagles were the team I picked when I started getting into the NFL. But subsequently, I hate the Cowboys, and I can't explain that hatred. It's just sport, and
Yeah, you're right.
to be in a position where you become a referee, you don't do that outside of the world of football. Those biases exist in you
Yeah.
from the
We talked
start.
about this before. We talked about you can't eliminate bias from everything in life. It's just bias is going to exist in every single aspect. It's you try and have the BBC turn around and say sort of like, all right, they've got a show called Unspun World, which is where they try and make sure that there's news just reported with absolutely no spin. And you're like, well, you're right, but the problem is that it's really hard to do that unless you're going to put all
Yeah.
views on the table. But sometimes all views probably shouldn't be on the table. So
Yeah. But
that is
even if you
unfortunately
take that
life.
sort of out of the way and you just talk even about footballing bias and how it exists, if you're refereeing the same teams every season and you're getting highly and harshly criticised for every decision, rightly or wrongly, if a player takes a dive and you give a penalty and you get criticised in the press and ripped a new one for weeks and weeks about it, the next time that player is playing and you're refereeing, in the back of your mind somewhere, it's got to be, you made me look a right idiot last time, and you're less likely to give anything. Like you're more likely to
Human,
let
isn't
them
it?
be fouled. It's
It's
just
being
human
human
nature.
is what you're saying, Greg, and that's why it's almost an impossible job, and that's why you're realistically supposed to have refereeing teams and maybe having one ultimate arbiter on the pitch. Isn't we've had lots of discussions before about what we could do, but ultimately, I don't
Mate,
think that we can decide it here.
Robot Wars, Refbot. It's the way. It's the only way.
When we come back, we'll talk about El Sackicko because that played out last night, and seemingly nobody has been fired as of yet. Russell Martin, I think, is still the favourite to go. So we'll have a discussion about that once we hear from our partners at Zencaster.
Yeah, so we here at the Global Sports Podcast Network spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencaster came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencaster.
So last night, Greg, we had El Sackicko, quote unquote, which is very funny because you could call most of our games that in recent times.
It's
So
crazy that even that term El Sackicko made it as far as the BBC. I mean, what has football social media become that it sort
it's
of breaches those harsh
yeah,
boundaries?
it's upsetting, and it must be difficult for managers to just sort of exist in an ecosystem where like the journalists outside it are deciding if they're being fired before their bosses are. West Ham won. narrowly edging out Wolves, so wasn't like it was anything too exciting. Wolves being Wolves,
Wolves managed to equalise, right? Sort of out of nowhere, from what I understand, and then immediately threw a goal away.
Yeah.
And
sounds like us, to be honest.
Yeah.
Except we got beaten quite convincingly by Wolves, in my
It does
opinion.
mean that Gary O'Neill is now the odds-on favourite to be the next manager sacked. He's
Might be the next manager
2 to
sacked
7.
and the next manager to get a job at Southampton.
Oh.
Why not? No, I don't think that's the case.
I genuinely, upsettingly, feel like there are worse options. But yeah, that would be wild. Can you imagine? 19th to 20th. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's very upsetting.
You're right. What a weird situation for a pair of managers to be in, that your job is so on the line and so dependent that social media is just rife with one of you's getting sacked.
Yeah, like you can understand it in the stadium, but yeah, the fact that that's basically what it's being touted at in the media, when realistically there's still quite a lot to play for both teams. It's not like us where we seem sort of glued to the bottom without really being able to pick up a point even here or there to try and swim out of danger, right? It's very much sort of their seasons could turn if players start playing properly.
Yeah,
And
well, I mean, obviously Wolves, it's a surprise that they're right down there with us, and it's not really a surprise that based off of that, sort of he's under the criticism he is. But it's a bit surprising for me that West Ham. I mean, he was new there this season, right? So
yeah,
he's had what 15 games.
mm.
It's baffling.
And
You've
obviously
got
they've lost Mikel Antonio, who's luckily okay after what was quite a horrific accident. Like,
yeah,
yeah, that's pretty awful. Like ex Saint there,
that's
so
pretty shocking. Yeah,
really bad, and hopefully he'll be all right. I don't imagine he'll be back to football if he's had lower limb surgery at 34, sorry. So yeah,
yeah,
either way, if that's the way to go out, it's
speedy
devastating. But
recovery.
that's one of the reasons that I think that they put that extra bit of effort in and said
Yeah,
that sort of the win was for him. So that's nice. I think
it is nice. But
shouldn't require
it's
that
just a
level of
bit
fight, but
baffling to be for a manager to be that under pressure that soon into what presumably is the start of a new project, because it's not like they were firing on cylinders under Moyes. Like, they were struggling, which is why they got rid of him. And
yeah, because they're sitting on
14th. God, what we'd
yeah.
give to be 14th.
Oh, everything at this point. Well, if you hear all of the people in the background, mate, they'll say we should be 14th. If we'd only put away every single chance we actually had, rather than mess about with it in the box,
But
it's
yeah,
hard not to bring all things back to Southampton.
it's just a bit crazy that it's even a discussion that short into a manager's tenure. For me, you've
That
got to
says
give him a chance.
that says, I think, more about our situation than anything else, right? Because, like, as I said, it's only really the sort of have been people that have been quite vocal from the start, but it's only been in the last week or two that people have really started to turn on Russell Martin.
Yeah.
And then across the other, fan bases, I remember us having our crossover with Wolves. They were kind of hoping, well, if we do lose, at least that will mean Gary O'Neill out. Yeah, from West Ham's perspective, like, I think also it's understanding expectations, though, right? Like, if you win a European trophy and then a couple of years later you're flirting with relegation, that's a problem. Like, we had a
Yeah,
situation
but
like that, right? Where we
with
were
the
sort of
greatest of respect, it wasn't a proper European trophy anyway, and they also really struggled in the league that season.
yeah, but that's what I mean. But like, this is the
Like, I
difference
understand it,
between
and not to take anything away from their win, fantastic for them. Again, what I'd give to be in that position, but they struggled in the league that season, and it was and then sold one of their best players in Declan Rice, and so clearly it's at this point the start of a project. You can't expect overnight success, and like, I know that West Ham are a big club, but you've got there's a process to get there. It's not going to happen overnight when they were down and around this area last season.
it's true, but again, it's the problem is it
Maybe
if
that's too
everyone
sensible. Maybe I'm
yeah,
just thinking too logically for a
this is your
football
issue,
fan,
right?
mate.
You're being really level-headed about this, and that's not how everyone treats football. And sometimes, if you go week in, week out, and you see what you would describe as a degradation of your football club, or you see an issue and you're worried that, oh, are we going to play like this for forever? They'd rather get him gone early and replace him with someone better. And it's, I can understand, this is where I can like understand the arguments from pretty much all Saints fans, and I still don't really know how I feel and where I lie. Like, there are times after that Chelsea game I was like, sure, get him gone. And then like I kind of sit there and think, well, who would we replace Russell Martin with realistically? And then it's like, well, actually anyone might be better. But then anyone might be better. I think back to when we got Pellegrino in, who bought our most expensive striker that scored no goals. And then when we managed to get Nathan Jones, because I don't trust Sports Republic to be able to buy, like, to get in a better manager than someone that isn't in the Championship. So it's kind of...
No, but even a broken clock's right twice a day. They could strike gold with an unknown. But you're right. I don't think the difference is, though, that we're a season and a half into Russell Martin's reign. And even in the Championship, the same mistakes that we're seeing sort of elevated this season because it's a harder league still existed. Like,
yeah, you're right.
we went 25 games unbeaten, but an unreasonable amount of those were draws that we should have won. Like, from the same sort of silly mistakes. And it's not, it's the refusal to learn from those mistakes and change that I think has turned the tide of opinion for Russell Martin. It's the stubbornness and sticking to his guns too much. And again,
process.
as I've said, that I'm not saying that we need to become a team that singly plays hoofball. I'm just saying maybe don't consistently put your players in a position where they need to be brave, because that is causing mistakes time and time again. Like,
yeah, it's an issue. I think we had a comment the other day on one of the social medias talking about how, like, we've had an injury ravaged season, which is true. However, they should not have put all of their eggs in the basket of Ramsdale being the hope and saviour of everything. And it was talking about how we've had loads of suspensions, and that is also due to this way that we play of bravery, where we're quite happy to take quote unquote cynical yellow cards, and then all of a sudden, when they all stack up at the same time, like they did the other day, it caused an absolutely devastating result. And sort of getting behind the team. And it's, I can understand getting behind the team, but I can also understand paying a significantly large amount of money to watch essentially what is entertainment, and being so depressed at the end of it, you've essentially paid for misery. And then to have the manager of your club then sort of blame you for having a laugh and a joke after you've travelled all the way up to Birmingham. Like, I think, to be honest, it was just a stupid comment, and he probably didn't mean a huge amount by it and was probably riled up. But it's like, well, you can't.
it's just,
It's just emotional maturity and emotional control needs to be something I think that both our club and ourselves as a fan base need a little bit more of, because we seem to be really bad at going from sort of one high of absolutely loving a day at Wembley to the absolute meltdown of just fire him, fire the board, fire everyone. And it's like, I think everyone
it's been a
realistically
process to get there, though, mate, because it's just it's the same. It's the refusal to change. There's been optimism that through the season from most fans that, oh, well, there are performances that we can build on, but it's still the same. We haven't built on anything. We just do the same thing every week, and that is where the frustration comes.
Yeah, you're right.
And you're right about injuries and suspensions, and we've talked a bit about, like, the fitness powerhouse we used to be that we no longer are, but there are more games, so I get it. Like, every team has struggled with injuries for as long as I can remember at this point. We've got a huge squad, though, but also our supposed leader and captain, Jack Stevens, by the time he comes back from this suspension, will have missed 43% of the season through suspension. Like,
yeah, there's
it's
a lot
just
all the
poor
time.
decisions. It is unlucky that we've had Ramsdale break his hand and the suspensions all come at the same time, but there's poor decisions as well around that have put us in that situation. And it's not like we haven't got a big squad. We haven't got a good squad, but we do have a big squad. And
yeah, this is the other problem, though, isn't it? Because that's what we've realised, is our depth is about as deep as a puddle. And that was a problem, because part of coming back to the Premier League was supposedly to build enough squad depth to deal with issues like this. And what we've actually done is not. And it's becoming more and more obvious as the weeks go by, unfortunately. Right. Well, we'll take a little break here to hear from the Global Sports Podcast Network. But when we come back, we'll have a bit of good news for Saints fans, especially Saints fans like me that live rent-free in the sort of 2013 to 2016 era. The Global Sports Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcasting with dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, fantasy football, and a daily Premier League wrap-up broadcasted in 5 different languages. This is your one-stop shop for your daily football fix. Find GSPN wherever you find your usual podcasts. Rightio, Greg. So it's not the most exciting thing in the world for us personally. For me personally, it's kind of exciting. But Maya Yoshida won a League Cup for the first time in his career. LA Galaxy won the MLS Cup. So Maya Yoshida being big part of that squad, got to celebrate finally winning a League Cup. How nice is that?
That's awesome. Yeah, good for him. That's great.
Yeah, they beat the New York Red Bulls 2-1. In a game where seemingly the first 30 minutes had pretty much all of the action. But I guess it's like, because obviously the MLS plays a bit different, it's almost like their Super Bowl, right? So they managed to win, which is very nice. It's the culmination of all the playoffs and bits and pieces.
Yeah, I can't claim to be an expert on the MLS.
It's a weird one, but it's either way. It's a kind of exciting. It's exciting to see Maya Yoshida win something after many, many, many years of trying and being, such a big part of our years ago sort of squad. It's nice to see people do great things. We say this quite a lot about our players, and I think this is the problem with a lot of Saints fans, is that, myself included, is we do live a little bit in the past. There's already people this week talking about, oh, well, Hasenhüttl was doing amazing at Wolfsburg. I'm like, yeah, but when he went, he really needed to go because we were probably going to go down. We did go down. We should bring back Ruben Sellis. He just got bought out at Hull. I'm like, we're already complaining that we got a championship manager. What about Danny Rowe? He was the guy that was assistant manager to Hasenhüttl at one point. I'm like,
look,
guys,
you said
please.
it as a joke yesterday, but I unironically saw someone on social media say, if money's the issue, why don't we just give it to Lallana until the end of the season? It can't hurt.
Yeah, that's what I mean, right? Like, why don't we just bring back Ricky Lambert? Why not just bring back, Letizia? He'll teach them a bunch of philosophy and also hopefully how to shoot at a goal. But yeah, it is a weird thing.
They'll go. Then they'll take it in the goal for you.
It's just, it's an unfortunate part, I think, of being a fan of a club like ours, is you do kind of get trapped in moments of time where you have the success, and that's because it's the nice times to look back on, right? It's like, the player final was such an amazing time, and as you said, I think that's genuinely what got Russell Martin to the position that he's in, where after as many games as we've had, it's only now the sort of noise is starting to get really kind of loud. And if we win a couple games, maybe that would change. But I also I struggle to believe we'll win anything. The good news though is obviously Tottenham's own squad are kicking out at them. So I saw that Christian Romero came out to criticise the Spurs board for the lack of spending. Could you imagine one of our players coming out and criticising Sports Republic for not spending money? I'd find that insane. But there we are.
That's crazy, right? To come out and say that as a player is. I mean, we've heard it from everyone who's ever been at Tottenham, right? That place is rotten from the top down. So,
well, it's just you look at every manager that's come out of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the list of quality managers they've had who have won everywhere else and not Spurs, and say that Spurs are the problem. I mean, even Ange, his reaction last year to Spurs preferring to lose to Man City so that Arsenal didn't win the league, right? Like,
yeah, it's very. A friend of mine from university who's like a diehard Spurs fan, and I watch the sort of pain and trials and tribulations that he's gone through since I've known him, being a Spurs fan. And we'll probably speak to some of the Spurs guys this week, but yeah, it does feel utterly painful, because that is a problem where you can specifically point at your board and go, well, you're the main issue, right? Like this is the thing. It seems that but then also you can't say they haven't invested, like they haven't invested to the levels of sort of Man City and Chelsea, but also like they bought Solanke this year. Madison had a good season last season. So far this season, like they've bought smart, I guess. They haven't bought terribly. Archie Gray hasn't quite got firing yet, and that might be to do with the way that they're doing things. But it doesn't seem. I think It must not be fun. But to have your players turn around and start saying that about the ownership of the club's nuts. Like, I could never imagine. Could you imagine Ryan Manning being like, "There's not enough investment in the quality of the squad"? It's just farcical to think, really, isn't it? But it is what it is.
The hand that feeds him, because if they're because with the deepest of respect for Ryan Manning, who has been half decent for us in the games that he's played this season, if we're spending money to replace people, he's pretty high on that list.
Yeah, it's
right behind someone who can actually score goals.
That'll be the day, mate. That will be the day.
Isn't a defender.
We'll have to see. We've still got plenty of season to go. We're hoping things don't turn too toxic. I don't think
it'll be fine, mate.
It's not going to turn toxic here. Put it that way.
By the time it gets to Sunday, everyone will be up for it as much as they can be. We'll be behind the team, and then we see what happens on the pitch.
I think if it's anyone we can take results from, it will be Spurs.
Even when it starts to turn negative, there's still some self-degrading humour involved.
Oh, that's always fun.
So
we have the ball.
It is what it is.
Again, the kind of chance that my wife hasn't heard. She didn't really pay much attention to our relegation season, but obviously I'm far more football involved and football focused nowadays because we do a daily podcast about it. So she kind of listens a lot more and watching her be like, but surely everything's miserable. I'm like, well, yeah, exactly. And you don't want it to be miserable, so you just start making fun, and then it's great.
Yeah.
And it must...
Johnston's Paint Trophy. You'll never win that. There we go.
So there you go. With a bright blaze of optimism, we go into tomorrow with our hopefully crossover episode with the Tottenham guys, and we'll be able to be even more optimistic about how we're somehow going to win 3-0. It's maybe another El Sackicko, who actually knows. Maybe
El Sackicko too. Maybe this time someone will actually get sacked. Who knows?
El Sackicko 2 electric boogaloo. But either way, it's been a pleasure, Greg. Thanks for this little sort of random chat about football in general and some of the news stories that have cropped up. We hope you have enjoyed listening to us today. Like us and follow us on all of the social medias if you fancy doing so. We're still a growing podcast. We're growing every day, and we're just really, really enjoying the ride, and we appreciate all of your support and all of you listening to us. We saw some of the Spotify raps and saw us quite up the top, and it kind of reminds us, we actually do have people that listen to us. So shout out to all of those people. We love you very much. So have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and we will see you tomorrow.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.